Many young people around 20 dream of traveling, discovering the world. We weren't any different. We wanted to see the world in all its unknown beauty. So no one hesitated when Peter came with a plan for a road trip to Russia. A few friends and thousands of kilometers of unknown, untamed nature. What could be better? We went for a beer so we could plan everything in detail. Bella, Tomas, Robin and I, Leia, college friends, we were all single. Well, except for Isabella, who had a boyfriend in Florida. He didn't want to and couldn't go, but we finally persuaded Bella to go without him. A few days later, we were sitting in a train compartment somewhere in northern Kazakhstan. Steel wheels thundered on the railway as we crossed the seemingly endless plains of Central Asia. Tom caught my gaze and smiled. He had brown hair and a somewhat stockier build than Robin. Robin had black hair and was playing some games on his phone. Bella was a bit shorter than the other girls and had dark hair. I was rather the opposite. My hair was light and I was taller than most girls. "We'll be getting off soon," Tom announced. I looked out the window again. I didn't want to get off, but I knew that new experiences awaited us that the pre-planned train route couldn't offer. In Tyumen, we got off the train and rented a car. We bought all the necessary equipment in case we camped somewhere. Then we packed it into the trunk of the new Lada. Impatience flowed in our veins. We felt more alive than ever before. We headed north to Ugidva National Park, the largest national park in all of Europe. The road north led through breathtaking forested peaks that rose to the sky and led one to a certain respect, but also a desire to see more, to see something that was just ours, not just planned tourist routes and roads. So we turned onto a side and much more lengthy road. The deciduous trees swallowed our rented Lada. The ride on the dusty road was surprisingly smooth. Here and there we passed through a smaller settlement, but most of the time we were accompanied only by seemingly endless forests. The locals looked at us like a ghost. They probably thought we were some stupid tourist from Yekaterinburg or even Moscow. I sat in the front seat next to Tomas and dozed off for a while. We weren't even halfway through the side route yet. Russian distances are Russian distances. And again, we began to move away from any settlement. And then we hit something that our 20-year-old heads should have expected. A fallen tree. "Great. Are we really that stupid?" said an angry Tomas. "Obviously we are," Bella remarked from the back seat. "So now somehow turn around and back again." "The whole route," Tom continued. "Wait, let's at least look around since we're already here," Robin suggested. Everyone fell silent. No one saw a reason why not. Maybe a similar opportunity wouldn't arise again. "Aren't there bears here?" Bella wondered aloud. "Come on now, don't imagine things. We'll just look around the forest and go back," Robin reassured. Tom hesitated, but the others were for it, including me. After all, it was just a short look around. There wasn't much to think about. We made a good choice. We overcame hills, steep elevations. We felt like we were alone in the world. I was completely enchanted. I even thought about whether I should start learning Russian. I wanted more of it. And there really was more. The Urals, Kamchatka, Siberia, the Caucasus. I probably wasn't the only one who immersed themselves in daydreaming. Because what started as a short look around turned into an hour-and-a-half hike. "All right, that would be enough," said Tomas. "Let's go back, we won't tempt fate." "But why? What could happen to us here?" Robin debated. Obviously he didn't want to go yet, just like me. "We could get lost," Tom replied. "Get lost? They don't have a bigger stickler for terrain orientation in Russia," Robin continued. "Just a bit more, Tom. Let's enjoy this a little more," I suggested. Tomas pursed his lips but nodded. We climbed another steep hill. The forest echoed with the hooting of owls. The wind rose with the rustling of leaves. "Another village," announced Bella, who was first to the top. "Nonsense. What would a village be doing here in the middle of nowhere?" Tom doubted. "Well, come and see," she replied with a smile. She was right. From the height, we looked down at some wooden settlement that probably still remembered the times of Russian Tsars. "Let's go take a look there. At least we'll refill our water," Robin suggested. "I don't know. Let's rather go back. It looks somehow strange. Those houses, that wood," Tomas opposed. Robin pushed him in a friendly way. "Come on, they won't bite you." He headed down the hill. Bella looked at me. I just smiled slightly and shrugged. "Come on, it'll be okay," I told Tom. He sighed and rolled his eyes, but he was fine. We went there. As we approached the first houses, it was clear that time had really sunk its teeth into it. The houses were partly rotten in places, and some windows were cracked or directly broken through. On the other hand, the local culture seemed to flourish quite well. From verandas, railings, and even from chapel doors, hung pieces of embroidery, covers, and other textiles with colorful patterns. Almost everywhere you could see hand-embroidered carpets and fabrics, round pillows in rainbow colors, decorated chairs and benches. But we hadn't met anyone yet, which was strange. "Where is everyone?" I voiced what everyone was thinking. "I don't know, but there must be someone here given those decorations," Tom replied. The first person we met was an old lady sitting on the veranda. She was just making embroidery for a pillow. As we passed with greetings, she raised her needle in a wide, elderly smile. It wasn't a nice sight, but apparently she just wanted to show off her work. We walked down the street toward the chapel. Tom suddenly jerked toward the window of the house on the left. "What is it?" Robin asked. "Nothing. I just thought I saw someone," he stammered. "But I think we should go. I don't think we're welcome." "Yeah, you're probably right," Robin agreed. With quiet creaking, the chapel doors opened, from which a man emerged. He was too far away for us to see his face. When he saw us, he suddenly stopped, then took 2 quick steps in our direction, and stopped again, as if he didn't know what to do. He stared directly at us. Then, something much further caught my attention. As I looked past him, I saw something hanging from the roof of the house. Something that resembled a human body hanging from the roof by its arms. But somehow, as if instead of skin it had carpet. It was quite far away. I didn't know what I was seeing, but I felt like I was in a nightmare. My heart started racing. "What are you doing here?" An English voice with an accent sounded behind us. I jerked around. An approximately 50-year-old man emerged from the door of one of the side houses. "We just came to look around. We're tourists," Tom said. "This is private property. Come inside. We'll sort this out," the man said irritably. "That's fine," Tomas replied in increasing discomfort. "We'll just leave. Sorry for bothering you. But I insist on it. You're trespassing on someone else's property, and that must be resolved," the Russian snapped. We exchanged worried glances. But we went inside. All 4 of us were quite scared and stiff. I didn't have a good feeling about it, but I still believed it was just a misunderstanding. The interior of the cottage was again decorated with colorful textiles, but the furniture was made of simple, dilapidated wood. The man sat down by the fireplace and pointed to a torn couch and 1 chair opposite. We sat down hesitantly. "Well, so tell me, what made you think of this? Just walking up to strangers like this out of nowhere?" Tomas caught the words. "We're tourists. We just wanted to look around and your village caught our interest. We wanted to take a look. We didn't know it could be a problem. But it is a problem," the man grumbled. "It took a lot of effort to convince this country to finally leave us alone. We're sensitive to anyone who threatens our way of life. Deeply." Tomas's jaw dropped. "We apologize for that, but we don't want to harm you in any way or threaten your lifestyle." "And you're wrong about that," the Russian raised his index finger warningly. "Americans like you will surely blab about us everywhere they go and draw attention to us. A little attention is enough, and everything we've worked for they'll take away from us again." "We won't tell anyone about your village, we promise," Bella said. The Russian stared at her. "You won't tell," he confirmed, "because one of you will stay here as a guarantee that your friends won't do harm." "Excuse me?" Bella protested. "Forget about that," Tom added. "One woman, to be precise." The Russian again raised his finger warningly. Tom shot up from the couch. I grabbed his hand to make him stop. My ideas that everything would be fine were quickly dissolving. The nightmare was very quickly becoming reality. Robin somehow stiffened with fear. The Russian frowned and got up from his chair. By then I had gotten up too, along with Bella. Even Robin got up. "We're leaving. No one will be interested in this hole, don't worry," Bella snapped. "Bella!" I whispered through clenched teeth, signaling her to be quiet. "Well, since you're so mouthy, you'll be the one staying here," the Russian said decisively. Bella froze on the spot. Suddenly, she was lost for words. "We have nothing more to say to you, and we're all leaving," I announced just as decisively. "No chance," the Russian said arrogantly. "One of you stays here, and don't try your luck." I looked at him defiantly. "You American scum are all the same. You know nothing about life, but you would disrupt it for everyone else." 2 more men entered the door, one pointing a hunting rifle at us. I looked back in shock. "Out of my house, and hands above your heads," the Russian's aggressive voice thundered. We obeyed. We went out to the veranda and then in front of the house. Fear, defeat, and feelings of humiliation bent our bodies and devoured us from within. "I still pity you Americans. You're young and stupid. You can still leave. The black-haired one stays." Bella began to look at us desperately in silence. Worries wrinkled her pale face. "We told you to forget about it, you bastard." My nerves snapped. Meanwhile, Tomas secretly began to look around looking for escape possibilities. But he only achieved that now the rifle was aimed at him. "I just can't stand your stench of superiority. I wanted to let you go, but if you don't start behaving, you'll all die horribly," the Russian threatened. None of us said a word to that. Only Bella started crying quietly. "That's better," he smiled. "Take the black-haired one away. You others get out of my sight." "No, no, help me. Tom, Leah." Bella screamed and begged when they took her away. We stood frozen in place in cowardly horror. "What are we going to do?" I whispered with a trembling voice toward Tom, my eyes filled with tears. The settlers began to slowly emerge from their houses. Most of them stared at Bella, who was still screaming for help. For a moment, however, her screaming stopped, and instead one of the men started screaming. Bella managed to free her hand for a moment and drove her fingers directly into his eye socket. The man cursed in pain and covered what was now an empty socket with his hand, from which dark blood was flowing. He quickly recovered, though, and gave Bella a terrible slap, so that the other man had to hold her on her feet. "Take just one step toward her, you scoundrel," the main Russian said toward Tomas. He saw that a bit of courage was beginning to awaken in us. He was visibly shaken by what he had just seen. He hadn't counted on one of his people ending up with a gouged-out eye. It made him even more hateful and angry. "Leave her alone," I screamed with enormous effort. But I only achieved that now the rifle was aimed at me. Another man emerged between the houses and ominously held a rope in his hand. He looked at the main Russian, who obviously commanded here, and continued toward Bella. We just watched with death in our eyes. They firmly attached fabric over her mouth so she couldn't scream. They tied her hands and began to pull her up into the air over a hook, driven into the roof. We watched motionlessly in horror. Bella's muffled screaming resonated in our bones. Another man approached with a jagged knife. She desperately thrashed from side to side, even though they held her firmly. I started crying. With her eyes, she begged us to finally do something. But what could we do? They were still aiming guns at us. The old men cut her shirt, and then with one stroke, also the skin from chest to belly. Bella's muffled shriek was deafening, and it multiplied when they began to cut away and tear off skin from her, as if it were also a piece of fabric, as if it didn't hurt at all. The men held her firmly. She couldn't move. "Leave her alone, you bastards," Robin screamed with red eyes. "Maybe you'd like to join her," the main Russian replied. Robin looked at him sharply and fell silent with fear. I hunched over like a scolded child with my gaze fixed on the dusty ground, just so the same wouldn't happen to me, just so I wouldn't be there too. In places where the skin was already stripped, the old women were sewing cut pieces of carpets with needles. Sophisticated hatred carefully worked on torturing the poor girl, who thrashed about but was held firmly. This can't go on, I told myself. I used all my will and courage to do something. I wouldn't be a coward who watches others suffer with a closed mouth. I felt how I was slowly resolving to stand up to injustice. My brain told me not to move and be quiet, but my heart was louder. I couldn't let her go through that hell. At least kill her. Tomas raged with totally destroyed nerves. He was apparently thinking similarly. For that, the Russian behind him hit him in the head with the butt, and he fell to his knees. "Tom!" I ran to him before anyone could try to stop me. Stunned, he swayed slightly from side to side on his knees. Blood slowly trickled down the edge of his head. However, his face showed indomitable determination. He looked me in the eyes, and then at his right pocket. He had a pocket knife in it. Thoughtlessly, I pulled it out and opened it. Well, it didn't take long for me to fully realize what a stupid thing I had done. The Russians were approaching me from all sides. Crying, I threatened them not to come near me. Instinctively, I took to my heels. I ran away. They were cutting Bella with a knife. Tom was barely conscious, and I cowardly ran away as fast as I could. I expected a shot that would hit me in the back. A small part of me maybe even wished for it. The shot, however, didn't come. The main Russian mumbled something, and I was getting further and further away. I ran desperately and frantically. For a while, I selfishly hoped that they would let me leave, as they had promised. But these hopes quickly died out. 2 men were running after me. If they catch me, I'd rather not even imagine it. I just ran for my bare life. My lungs were about to collapse. I paid attention to the surrounding houses and how I stepped. I knew that if I tripped, it was over. If someone came out on the street from a house and crossed my path, it was over. I was afraid of every door, every small crossroads. To my right, a door opened with a creak. My heart probably stopped for a moment. A woman came out of them. But she didn't do anything. She just watched me like a strange phenomenon. I ran several meters around her. I was slowly approaching the edge of the village. The chance that I would get away was becoming more and more real. However, every meter overcome seemed to be longer and more demanding. How much I wished not to be in the situation I found myself in, for it to be just a bad dream. I was almost there. Just a few more houses to run past to be outside. Small comfort, but I might really succeed in at least getting out. I quickly passed the last houses, checking places where someone could run out at me. Nothing. I ran out into a meadow, which however rose steeply up a hill. There was no room for joy. 2 men were still after me, wanting to catch and kill me, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep running. My whole body was tense, exhausted, and sore. My breath was collapsing. The only thing that still drove me forward was adrenaline and incredible fear of what they would do to me when they caught me. Vulgar curses in Russian filled me with horror, but at least I knew they didn't have me yet. I ran through the first trees, but I was slowly being overtaken by bitter, sad reality. I wasn't able to escape from them. I felt how the first of them stepped on my heel and pulled my shirt. Frantically, I turned and bit into the Russian's throat. He secured my hand in which I held the knife, but that wasn't much use to him anymore. I was like a wild animal fighting for survival. We fell to the ground. The man writhed in pain and grabbed his bitten throat. I was still lying right on top of him. When the second man incautiously approached me, I took the knife and drove it into his stomach. The Russian roared in pain and leaned against a tree. He tried to pull it out while cursing at me foully. With wide eyes, I silently backed away, not knowing where that came from in me. But I realized I didn't have time. I quickly got moving and ran away. I hurried through the forest. I was so afraid they would catch me. The autumn forest now seemed cruel and lifeless to me, without colors. I kept looking over my shoulder. I felt like something was watching me, something that knew I couldn't escape. Again, I looked back and my heart stopped for a moment. The main Russian appeared over the slope. Again, I was running, but I was running out of strength. Self-pity mixed with exhaustion in me. "American girl," he shouted at me. "There's no point in running. Come back and things might not be so bad. Move here right now." I stopped. For a moment, I really considered going back. I have no hope of escape. I shouldn't provoke them even more. The Russian was pleased that his violence had worked on me. That's better. In the end, however, I found lost courage and pride in myself. I straightened up and again took to my heels. "You stupid bitch, when I catch you, you'll experience something, do you hear me?" He screamed at me with anger and aggression, completely beside himself. I managed to get out of sight again, but I was lost. I didn't know where I was and the daylight was disappearing. I couldn't find anything that would help me orient myself. There was nothing left but to go straight and hope I would hit a signal and civilization. Unfortunately, I was still surrounded by endless forests. How could I mess this up so badly? We weren't that far from settlement. Lost in thought, I didn't notice that the Russian was silently sneaking up on me from the side. I screamed in shock and started running, with him also breaking into a run. I thought I had no hope now, but in the distance I glimpsed one of the villages, or rather settlements we had passed through. "Help! Help!" I screamed. The Russian cursed at me from a distance, but I didn't notice him. The only thing that interested me was getting to people to safety. I was approaching the first huts, but no one was outside. This made me uncertain, but I kept running. I ran into the settlement and called for help, but it was as if the settlement was completely empty. "Please help me! I'm being chased! Help me!" I screamed and banged on the door of the wooden cottage. The wood thundered, my fists hurt, but no answer. I turned to see where the Russian was, and on the other side I glimpsed someone looking through the curtain. I quickly perked up and ran to the other side, but the person in the window disappeared. "Help, please, help me." I banged on the door, but no one opened. I turned around. The Russian was already with me. He walked toward me with quick steps. I banged harder on the door, but they wouldn't open. I screamed and cried desperately. Then he took me and threw me into the street. I flew off the veranda steps and rolled over several times. I slid away from him on the ground in horror, but he was approaching quickly. When I tried to get up, he knocked me back to the ground with a slap. Half stunned, I fell to the ground. Blood was flowing from my nose. "Please, no." I begged for mercy. He took me by the hair and dragged me on the ground back. "Please help!" I screamed and cried. I tried to get up, but he jerked my head and I fell to the ground again. The skin on my right hand was scraped and burned terribly. He dragged me like prey, like something that wasn't a human being but a piece of meat. Why wasn't anyone coming to help? Why were they leaving me alone with him? I tried to scratch as best as I could. When the Russian saw this, he threw me to the ground. He stepped on my hand and started beating me head to head. Blows and kicks landed on my body and face so that I must have looked like an alien. Finally, I lost consciousness. I woke up only in the dark. At first, I didn't know where I was. Dread gnawed at my guts when I realized I was in the forest after dark. The Russian was carrying me thrown over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. I didn't even move from fear. I had no idea what to do, so I started crying. The Russian mumbled something. It didn't throw him off at all. I had my hands tied. No more defense or dignity, just darkness. I wanted to cry even more, but I told myself I was still alive, and people who loved me would want it to stay that way. Yes, I made a promise to myself that I would survive, and that helped me cope with it somehow. He carried me for almost another hour. With my eyes closed, I imagined I was somewhere else. Then I was able to tell him I would walk on my own. Surprisingly, he agreed to it, but still firmly gripped my arm like walking property. Our steps broke twigs and rustled in the leaves. The forest was scary at night. I saw faces in the bark of trees and didn't know if we would meet anyone else. But the worst had already happened to me. I was captured and callously dragged like someone who no longer decided about themselves. I'd rather not think about it. I will live. I will bring them to justice. We walked back to the carpet village. Everyone was already asleep, but I still felt eyes on my back. This village was always watching. "Your friend," the Russian said coldly and callously, and shone a light on a hanging body that I hadn't noticed before. I flinched. It was Tomas. My heart pounded and tears quickly flowed from my eyes. He was wrapped in bloody carpet fabric, as if they were bandages. The mutilated body of a person who wished everyone only good. I wanted to smash my head. I wanted to bite my tongue. I wanted to scream and curse everyone around me, but I promised myself I would live. He led me to a small room in his house and chained my hand to the bed. Then he also brought a pot. Apparently, I'll be staying here. I can't describe what horror and helplessness I experienced from within. I lay down, but couldn't close my eyes for some time. I couldn't even move much, paralyzed by the reality I found myself in. After hours that flowed really slowly, I began to doze a little from exhaustion. I moved on the edge of waking and dreaming, but I didn't allow myself to fall fully asleep. I felt vulnerable. I had to stay awake so I could defend myself. I opened my eyes and sat up on the bed in terrible amazement. In the middle of the room, someone was gracefully dancing, as if dancing ballet. He had his head, limbs, and whole body wrapped in carpet. "Tom," I said with sorrow and tears in my eyes, "I am sorry." The figure stopped dancing and turned to me. I opened my eyes in the darkness and no one was in the room. No one stood in the open doorway either. My breathing was rapid. My heart was pounding and aching. I began to sweat under my arms. I put my head on the pillow and tried to calm down. Then I started crying again. I opened my eyes, and in front of me stood a small black-haired boy, barely ready for school attendance. Again, I was startled. He quickly bent down and put his finger to his lips, trying to signal me to be quiet. I obeyed. I tried to calm my breathing and looked at the door. No one was there. We were alone for now. When he saw I was starting to calm down, he pulled a key from his pocket. He took my hand and put the key in the lock, the shackles loosened. He looked carefully at the door and signaled me to follow him. I was terribly afraid, but what could I do? This little boy was like my angel. But I didn't really believe I would manage to escape, and if they caught me, someone would make sure I regretted it. Walking was difficult and painful for me. Fortunately, I had no fractures. I was proud of myself. I felt like a tough girl, but it was only a matter of time before I collapsed from all this. We walked through a hallway where snoring could be heard. I was scared to death and pale. My steps seemed clumsy and too loud to me. The wood echoed under my weight. We went to the main door of the house, and the boy carefully opened the door slightly. The door creaked worse than one can imagine. I turned to the bedroom with dread in my eyes. The snoring stopped, and deathly silence reigned in the house. My knees were shaking, but no one came. The boy signaled me to follow him. We found ourselves directly on the main road. It was dark. We were hard to see, but we weren't invisible. Anyone from the opposite houses could glimpse us. Every dark outline of a house hid people who were sleeping, but could wake up at any time. And maybe they were even awake. I'd rather not think about that. We quietly walked around the house. I crouched and prayed they wouldn't catch us. If someone started yelling at me in that darkness, my heart would probably collapse and it would all be over. Rather, I would again be dragged toward torture, and no cute little boy would help me anymore. I really wanted to sit down and start sobbing. What am I trying to do here? I told myself. I expected them to catch us any moment. I really couldn't walk any further, if not for the boy who sharpened my thoughts only on following him. We quietly passed from cottage to cottage, keeping to the walls and under windows. Every step of mine seemed too loud. The boy's feet silently glided over the packed clay. I followed him between the houses. The moon hid behind clouds. The village was drowning in thick darkness. We ran to another house, or rather shack. I leaned against the wall and the wood creaked. The boy looked at me in fright. My knees were shaking. And then someone behind the window moved the curtain. The boy jerked his gaze to the window. He had death in his eyes. He signaled me to crouch down, to sit. I heard the floor creaking under the settlers standing by the window. Then there was quiet manipulation with the window, and the window opened. The boy sitting firmly pressed his knees to his chest and rocked slightly. He was completely out of it with fear. With bated breath, I watched someone staring out from the open window. The boy's nails were completely pale from gripping. I prayed he wouldn't notice us. We were almost under the window. I didn't dare even move. I just waited to see what would happen. One unfortunate sound. One lean from the window. So little was enough for someone to return me to my hell. My hand was shaking inhumanly. The window closed. With relief, I closed my eyes, trying to calm down. The boy surprisingly recovered faster than me. He tapped me on the shoulder so we could go again. I walked on packed clay and in grass. I felt like you must be able to hear us passing. I counted every second, every meter we overcame. We were slowly getting to the edge of the settlement. Everything was almost perfect. The silence that reigned in the village, however, didn't calm me. On the contrary, I felt like something bad was preparing, that it wasn't possible that the whole time no one was dealing with me being gone. This forced me to pick up the pace. Out of nowhere, a piercing, senseless scream swept through the village. The wail gnawed into my bones. Mikhail, that must have been the boy's name. I turned to him. We were already beyond the edge of the village. Come with me, I said pleadingly. The boy just shook his head. Tears rushed to my eyes. Please, I insisted. The boy refused again. He didn't speak English, but he knew well what I was saying. With horror in my eyes, I looked at the village, which was coming to life after the terrible scream. I looked at the boy. Thank you, Mikhail. Then I disappeared into the forests. I walked through the forest carefully and as quietly as possible. Dark outlines of trunks and branches surrounded me. I tried to be as quiet as possible. Still, it seemed to me that my stepping on leaves and twigs must have been clearly audible. I plunged deeper into the forest and it was no longer possible to see even a step. I took out my phone, which they forgot to take from me, and lit the dim flashlight on the ground. I crouched and walked through the bushes. My brain saw small and large figures in the darkness. I tried not to pay attention to it. I still had 17% battery. That might last until morning. I made my way through the forest quite successfully. I overcame fallen trees, difficult to pass bushes, even a small stream. But the sounds of the night forest terrified me. Owls, foxes, wolves. I didn't know who inhabited the night forest, but I definitely didn't feel alone. I turned off the flashlight for a moment to see if I could see anything. At that moment, something between a wail and laughter sounded. It sounded like an echo of the sentence, "I see you." My heart started racing. My head must have been playing games on me. It was probably wind or some animal, but just to be sure, I turned on the flashlight and looked around. Nothing. Just creepy wrinkled trees and their branches. But I only shone on the ground, so if someone else was there, I wouldn't see them. I walked on, trying to think rationally. Just the forest and me. I'm far away and no one sees me. Just walk and I'll get away from here, I told myself. But walking tired me. I sat down and leaned against a tree trunk. In the darkness, I listened to the sounds of the night forest. Here and there the wind rose. Here and there an owl hooted. But then I heard something that immediately returned me to the nightmare. It was footsteps. Monotonous, regular footsteps were approaching me directly through the darkness. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Should I turn on the flashlight? Should I call out with my voice? I sat quietly and fought with fear and trembling. The footsteps stopped. I didn't even peep. After a moment of calm, however, footsteps started sounding through the leaves again, as if someone was approaching me. Adrenaline mixed with terror in me. I couldn't stand it. I got up regardless of making sound and shone the flashlight on the ground. I looked around, but I couldn't see anyone. I walked and carefully looked around, but I couldn't find anyone. My heart was about to jump out of my chest. I controlled my breathing. Fear in the soul physically hurt, but nothing happened. I turned off the light. I moved a little and sat by another tree. I tried to calm down, what I would give for at least one of my friends to be here with me now. Silence fell in the forest. I began to calm my breathing. I didn't think about whether someone would jump out at me, but about how to get away from here. I needed to get to a place where there were normal Russians or at least find a signal. Those footsteps started sounding through the leaves again. I got up. I didn't have nerves for this. I turned on the flashlight and carefully looked around. When I didn't glimpse anyone, I set off quickly. I felt so loud and conspicuous that I couldn't even distinguish whether those footsteps were still sounding. I just hurried through the forest with the possibility that someone might be chasing me. I tore through leaves, mud, twigs. My breathing was speeding up again, and I was starting to get tired. I continued hoping that no one was following me, that no one was there. I passed between trees and bushes as fast as possible. I felt like a running deer trying to escape, even though it made no sense. When I couldn't anymore, I just turned off the flashlight and walked to the side. I leaned my whole body against a tree trunk and gasped for breath as quietly as possible. I didn't hear any footsteps, but just to be sure, I didn't move. Nothing. The forest seemed calm. I carefully sat down. How did I even get into this situation? it occurred to me. In one moment, a person carefreely studies, and in another, they're in the middle of a forest, in a situation from which there's no escape. It was horrible. If footsteps started sounding again, I would probably go crazy. But no footsteps came. Only the quiet life of the forest sounded around. I closed my eyes. When I opened my eyes, panic gripped me. It was dawning. How could I be so stupid? How could I fall asleep, completely beside myself? I looked around the forest, into which light was slowly creeping. I slowly checked if I was even whole, but it seemed that no one had noticed me. I didn't see anyone. A slow, dark relief came to me. But I still had a feeling of enormous threat. They were still looking for me. There was no doubt about that. And I had stupidly fallen asleep in the middle of the forest like an idiot. My body must have been tired from all this. I can be grateful they haven't found me yet. I carefully got up and quickly looked around. I pondered for a while which way to go and then continued through the forest. I took out my phone to check the signal. It was dead. Idiot. Really an idiot. I crossed forested hills and went down again. I felt like I was alone in the autumn forest, but reality didn't let me wait long. In the distance, I noticed two men walking through the forest. They wore faded primitive rags and moved as if they had a clear purpose. Frozen in place, I didn't even breathe. They didn't see me. They looked around, but they were a bit ahead of me, so they didn't notice that what they were looking for was nearby behind them. But it was enough for them to turn around a bit, and hell would quickly run in my direction. I tiptoed inconspicuously to the nearest tree and leaned against it with my back so they couldn't see me. I heard them mumbling something in Russian in the distance. An image flashed before my eyes of how beaten and bloodied I would lie unconsciously in the leaves. I'd rather close my eyes. My chest rose and fell with fear. My legs were shaking. When the two Russians were out of sight, I cautiously stepped away. I deviated from their direction, but not completely, because I was already too afraid I was walking in circles. The path was somewhat easier now. The surface began to level out. I could walk faster, but I was visible from a much greater distance. That was quite disturbing. I picked up the pace even more. After about a kilometer of constant tension, the ground undulated again slightly. I was somewhat relieved that at least partially, I was no longer visible from a distance. But what I missed was that I couldn't see anyone either. Near one slope, a young man suddenly addressed me in Russian. He wore a hoodie and worn jeans. I didn't understand where he came from. He seemed to be asking if I was lost. He looked natural. At the same time, however, he continued to stand several meters away from me. I didn't know what to answer. Then I looked into his eyes and something told me, "Run." I ran away as fast as I could, and at that moment he also rushed after me. He shouted something in Russian, but not at me. He was probably calling to others that he had found me. I drove myself as if it should be the last time in my life, and despite the pain, he couldn't catch me. Then I heard something I couldn't even believe. There should be a road nearby. I hurried to the road. I didn't look back. What was behind me at that moment didn't exist. I ran to the foot of a quite steep slope, and below it was a road. And not only that, a car was coming. I slid down on my butt and got quite bruised in the process. But I immediately got up and hurried directly toward the car. The car honked, but slowed down. The driver was probably afraid I would run directly under his wheels. I banged on the window like a madman. "Let me inside! I'm being attacked! Let me inside!" I fought my way into the car like crazy, but the driver didn't unlock. He just watched in horror and didn't understand what was happening. But there was no time for that. With terror in my eyes, I looked over my shoulder to the slope to see if they were coming yet. Just as I looked away for a moment, the car accelerated and disappeared from reach. "No!" I shouted disappointedly and ran 3 meters after it. And at that moment, I noticed 3 men climbing down from the slope. They were coming for me. With tears in my eyes, I ran to the other side, where the first car had come from. For them, it was easier to cross my path. But I naively thought there was a better chance of meeting an approaching car there. And a car really was approaching. It was tremendous luck, because I couldn't run much further. Again, I began to chaotically bang on the window and beg for help. This driver was also confused and scared, but by then they had caught up to me. One of them grabbed me from behind and pulled me from the car. Frantic, I screamed and waved my arms. The remaining 2 Russians were suddenly calm and civilized. One of them knocked on the window and signaled for the driver to roll it down. The one in the hoodie stood aside. The driver reluctantly cracked the window and sharply asked what was happening here. The Russian politely leaned one hand on the car and calmly explained that I was their younger sister, but I wasn't quite right in the head. He said I sometimes ran away from home and they had problems with me. "No, don't listen to them," I screamed for my life in English. The driver looked at me. He was young. He could have been about 30. Then he nodded, rolled up the window, and drove away. "No, no," I wailed and struggled. The man behind me gripped me even tighter with his arms. The Russian, who had negotiated, came to me and gave me a reverse slap. I immediately fell silent and fell to the ground on all 4s. Blood flowed from my nose. Right after that, he started shouting for them to pick me up and drag me to the forest. And that's exactly what the man behind me did. He grabbed me under the arms and began to drag me to the trees. But then another car started coming from the other side. I didn't really care. I was barely conscious and didn't have visions of a happy ending. But I noticed that it was the same car that had been there a moment ago. The driver simply shouted from the car, "Police are coming here. Get out while you can." All 3 aggressors froze, as if time had stopped. "I swear I'll kill you, you bastard," said the man who had just slapped me and stepped toward the driver. He shifted into reverse. "Don't complicate it with the police even more. You better get out of here. I'm giving you good advice." The driver didn't give in. The Russian stopped and clenched his fists with anger. Then he said something to the driver that I didn't understand at all and hurried away. The others followed him. The man who was holding me let me go, and I fell to the ground again. The driver drove up to me and helped me into the car. I said in Russian in a whisper, "Thank you." That was the only thing I could get out of myself, beaten and traumatized. He handed me over to the police, who threw a blanket over me and offered a psychologist. But I no longer spoke. Before I returned home, I had to be part of the entire investigation process. The faces of those men terrified me, as if I was still there, as if I had never gotten out of that forest. Family flew to Yekaterinburg to support me. When we finally got home, it was already dark. I looked around my room and slowly lay down in bed. I felt unhappy and a little guilty. I looked into the room, and there a man was gracefully dancing. His whole body was wrapped in carpet material. I sat on the bed with tears in my eyes. "Tom, I am sorry," I said with a wail. The man stopped dancing and took 2 steps toward me. My breath caught with fear. He was like a creature from another world, from a world where everything has a strangely faded shade. He raised his hand and, like a towel, began to unwrap the carpet from his head. The stitches connecting the carpet to the flesh on his face and neck were tearing away. I heard my breathing quicken. For support, I leaned my hands on the mattress. The bloody carpet slowly revealed a red face. The man looked like an inhabitant of hell itself. It was the driver who saved me. "No! No!" I screamed, completely beside myself, completely sweaty. Mom sat on the edge of the bed and hugged me. "It was just a dream, little girl. You're home now." I closed my tearful eyes in her embrace. My mental health was probably disturbed more than I could comprehend. Yet something told me it wasn't just a bad dream. Something told me that my nightmare continued. I looked at the nightstand, and there my phone was blinking. A new email had arrived saying, "Hello. Just hello.